click the button. Oh, thank you.
Done.
Okay. So welcome everyone to our bi-weekly meetings now for Grimoire Lab working group. Today is 19th of May 2020, 5 p.m. here in Spain, any other time around the world. So thank you all for joining. We were discussing before pushing the recording button that today we are trying new things in Grimoire Lab. So I try to be as neutral as possible. So let me know if this is not working in the right way. So we have today the pleasure to have with us Penny Vasquez from CHEF. She's community manager. She will introduce herself now in the following minutes. It happens that CHEF is a customer of Bitergia, but at the same time, CHEF in this case is using Grimoire Lab, and she had on the table a really interesting use case for metrics discussion, and specifically for Grimoire Lab related to DevRel metrics. So I thought it might be a good opportunity for everyone here to share experiences, lessons learned, and the way we are working all together. Penny, it would be great if you can introduce yourself, and maybe the rest of us, we can do the same, so then we know each other.
That would be awesome. So I'll go. I'm Penny Vasquez. I am the community manager at CHEF. I just started at CHEF in November, but I've been the community manager for almost a decade in various different ways. Before CHEF, I was working at a software company called cPanel. They do web hosting automation, and I ran the community team there. So that's kind of my, the brief history. Before that, I was a sysadmin, so I've got very deep Linux roots, but these days it's all people instead of computers, which are way harder than computers. As the community manager at CHEF, this is actually the first time that they've had a person that is just community management. So they've had community focused folks before in a variety of different ways, but my job is very much both very hands-on, making sure that our questions in Slack and Discourse are answered, but also high level, are we setting goals that are realistic? Are we meeting those goals? How are we getting there? That kind of stuff. And are our efforts having any impact, I guess, is more important. I guess I'll leave it there, and then we can talk about kind of how we got to Bitergia and what we got out of y'all after we do intros. Does that make sense?
Good, thank you. So the next one I have is Georg.
Hi, my name is Georg Link. I'm the director of sales at Bitergia, and I'm a co-founder of the CHAOSS project, maintainer of different areas, and I'm also leading the effort to have our community podcast.
Thank you. Armstrong, you're the next one.
Yeah, my name is Fanjem Armstrong. I'm a PhD candidate at École Polytechnique in Montreal, Canada. So I'm focusing more on the releases of software ecosystem and the application of AI, like artificial intelligence, on understanding several phenomena within the ecosystems. So I'm very much engaged with the CHAOSS project. It's like a big milestone for me. It relieves a lot of work that I should have done myself. So I'm very much excited belonging to this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob, I have you in the next one.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Redding. I lead up our open source initiatives at Accenture. And I sort of have known about the project for a while, and I decided to poke my head in and just see what was going on. So I'm actually not part of a working group at all. Just like I'm an innocent bystander that thought I was just poking my head in and got sucked in. So, but happy to help in certain ways. I just really love the project and wanted to see what was going on. And it was an open meeting, so
yeah, welcome.
Thanks for letting me hang out in the corner.
Welcome, and thanks for joining. Matt, you're the next one.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Matt German-Prey. It's really nice to see everybody here. So Benny, thanks for joining, and Jacob, no hiding, so it's not gonna happen. I'm a professor at the University of Nebraska at Omaha in the College of Information Science and Technology. I'm also one of the co-founders of the CHAOSS project, currently serving as co-director of the board of the CHAOSS project, and kind of just make sure the gears keep turning in a variety of different spots in the project. So that's what I do.
Anna, I have you as next one.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm working also at Bitergia as marketing specialist, and I'm not into any CHAOSS working group right now. I would love to and actually get more activity in CHAOSS. So hopefully I will get into it.
Do you want to start a DevRel working group?
Oh, well.
So yeah, thank you, Anna. So Anna is here because of you, Benny. So we were discussing about DevRel. So thank you both. And Benny,
Very cool.
you're the next one.
Hi, I'm Bedu. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Bedu. I'm currently a student in India. I'm selected as a GSOP student. I'll be working with GrimoireLab for this summer. Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining. And me myself, I'm not from Canada, even though it's here the flag. So I just bought this when I was in Toronto years and years ago. So I'm Anil Izquierdo, one of the founders of Bitergia and CHAOSS, and working here and there, and really interested in metrics. Initially in the diversity and inclusion working group. Lately, I'm trying to participate in others, not really successful at this. Yeah, this is me. Yeah, so I would say, if you all agree about today's, is as we have people dealing with DevRel, maybe I don't know if you mind to give like a brief introduction about what this means in your daily job, Penny.
Yeah, sure. So for us, the chef community is kind of unique for me, at least. So at a web hosting company, which is where I kind of got started as a community person. We called it evangelist back then, which was terrible. But and then at cPanel, which is a closed source software, those situations were wildly different from an open source software, which is what Chef is. So it's been pretty unique for me coming into like the open source ecosystem. The thing that is most unique, I think, about DevRel at Chef is that we're dealing with both user communities and development community. So we've got people that are just using the software and how do I do this, or how do I accomplish what I want to accomplish, and then the other side of it is people that are because there's so much code involved in using Chef, it's also really easy for people to translate into contributor. And so kind of enabling people translating into contributor and figuring out whether or not like how we encourage the behaviors that we want to, and that kind of stuff. It's been unique because for the last, I want to say 2 or 3 years, Chef hasn't put many resources into actually building up the contributor community at all. They've done a pretty good job at increasing the number of users, but they're not really like encouraging a user community at all. It's just there's a place for you to go to ask questions and get answers, and that's it. So it's been interesting to see the people that are still contributing and why they're still contributing when they've gotten basically no like official support from Chef. They've got like there's some advocates internally, but it's not a huge focus for Chef. And to see what's going on with those folks and why they're still around.
So for this, maybe I can bring some more context, the different data sources that we, what you are analyzing in this case in the dashboard. So I can say I have this in front of me. I'll share my screen later. So we have this course, we have Git repositories, we have GitHub issues, we have GitHub pull requests, Slack channels, and Stack Overflow. So I assume that when you where do you look for the users and where do you look at for the developers? Are all mixed, perhaps?
A giant mix, yeah. So in the GitHub, obviously we can track contributors. So like we can say these are the people that are that are employees, and we can kind of filter them out and look at external contributors specifically. And then we can only really do that with Bitergia, because trying to do that in GitHub itself is nearly impossible. But that's primarily where we look for developers, is GitHub. Users, we're looking at Discourse and Slack, because those are the places that people come in to ask their questions and then stick around and either help other people or just gain more knowledge by being there.
So this reminds me. So we've been discussing some weeks ago about other use cases, not for the April or well maybe, but we were discussing about welcome Alberto, you just joined. We were discussing about the difference between soft contributions and hard contributions, and for hard contributions we were discussing about purely commits, so someone that got a piece of code landed into the baseline, the code baseline, while soft contributions were everything else. So even issues, commenting on issues, even code review activities. So I don't know if you have a specific opinion about, perhaps, because I have the feeling that hard contributions might be something else, even more than just a comment.
Yeah, maybe. I think that would be a very interesting distinction to make when you're looking at data. Like the difference between I submitted a pull request and I'm commenting on a pull request or approving or reviewing or whatever. You know what I mean? That's definitely an interesting delineation there.
So Alberto, you just joined, just to keep you up to date. So we were just introducing ourselves, and then we started to discuss about DevRel and so on. And then I brought the topic of this discussion about hard contributions and soft contributions that we had some weeks ago here in the Grimoire Lab meetings. And yeah, interesting enough to say, so we were making this distinction between users and developers, all right. But then in the specific use case that we have for you, we started initially with Discourse, GitHub, and Slack. But for instance, we are not even talking about Git repositories. Is this because you are trying to focus mainly on users, or?
I think I missed a key word in your last two sentences.
Oh yeah, so I will. Oh, let me share indeed my screen, so then we can go faster. Oh, I cannot share my screen, Georg. Do you mind?
Okay. Let me see. Security, allow everyone to share screen there.
Thank you.
You can also, Georg, you can also just make Daniel co-host or host, and then he has the ability to share screen. That's how I said it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So you should see now the chef projects.bitter.io. So let me share this in the chat, so then you can all access here. Where is the chat? Chat. Here we go. Yeah. So so going back to the question I had. So we were making this difference, Benny, between users and developers. So then when we started to discuss about the different data sources that might be useful to understand users' behaviors or developers' behaviors, in this case, in the 3 DevRel panels we started to work with were Discourse and Slack. So Discourse and Slack you specifically mentioned as interesting for users, as they are kind of the places where they are starting. But then we have GitHub as well. So why GitHub?
So GitHub is an interesting situation for us, because all of our internal developers interact with our GitHub as well as our external developers. So everything is all in one place. And GitHub is obviously it's the collaboration tool, right? But it's the place where we will find people that aren't in Discourse or Slack. They, for some reason, they have used a cookbook or used a resource or done something for a long enough time that they don't need to come in to have a conversation in any of our places. They just know, okay, this is the update that needs to be made, and then they submit the pull request and it's done. Otherwise, if we didn't have GitHub there, we would never see those people come in. We'd never be able to interact with them, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
They would
So
never show up on our radar.
Yeah, that makes absolutely sense. So fortunately, we have Alberto with us. Even when I didn't ask him about this, maybe Alberto just get ready to explain a bit the panels because you were the one producing them. So it would be good if you can drive us around them. I can share my screen. I can do it. Yeah. So going. Whoops. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I messed with my. Let's do this now. Perfect. Sorry, I had my terminal on top of the browser. Yeah. So to give a quick overview of the dashboard, I think it makes sense. I can drive you around a bit about this. So this is Grimoire Lab project. So the same that the open source project that you have is what in this case Bitergia is installing in customers and so on. And then the different data sources that we have available in this case for Chef are this course where we have the overview, Git, data source where we go for the Git log and analyze specifically the logs. So we try to avoid the GitHub API because there's richer information available in the Git logs instead of going directly to the API. And then for this, there are several panels as the overview, attraction, retention, in terms of understanding newcomers to the community and those leaving the community, areas of code to check where those developers are participating at, in the sense of files, folders, well, areas of the code at the end, and then life cycle for to check those projects that are how they are evolving in terms of activity and people joining them and producing code in them for over time. Then we have GitHub issues and pull requests that are, they provide similar information in the sense of activity, and then we have backlog timing and efficiency in the three of them, where backlog is the place where you can look at the backlog, look for the newest tickets or go for the oldest ones. Then we have the timing in the sense of looking for bottlenecks, the time to close, the time to merge things, and efficiency, analyzing the lead time, that if we click on GitHub pull request, we have exactly the same analysis. As you can see, I can click in any of them as, for instance, the lead time. So for this, we have like the time to merge in median, which is the 50% best of all of the pull requests that we have for the last 90 days in the Chef projects that we are analyzing here in Grimoire Lab, is less than 1 day, even less than half a day. So each time there's a pull request, in less than half a day, those are closed, are merged. If we go, for instance, for tickets, numbers might be a bit different, probably at the level of days, yeah, because issues take a bit more of time because they are not supposed to be closed till we have the pull request in place. And then Slack channels and Stack Overflow to understand questions and answers from the community. So maybe Benny, if you don't mind, so maybe you can introduce why you wanted to have this course data, why you wanted to have GitHub data, and when you wanted to have Slack data, a bit more in detail. So just from the DevRel perspective.
Sure. So Discourse, for anybody that's not familiar, is essentially a forum. Like I can't think of any of the other examples, but it's just an online forum. It's a site where people go submit a post that says, this is the problem that I'm having, and folks can go comment on that problem and offer solutions. We also use it for release notes and release announcements. It is the solution that Chef moved to instead of using a mailman mailing list for everything. There's a whole bunch of history there that I don't think we need to get into, but it was the solution that was decided upon as a replacement for a mailing list. The interesting thing that I have found, both in just watching it and in looking at the picture or looking at the data, is that folks will come here and ask a question, and if they don't get an answer almost immediately, they'll go to Slack and ask the same question. So that's very I think that's telling about what like the urgency with which people ask questions. When they're asking a question, if they don't get an answer within a couple hours, they're like, well, I need something more immediate. So they move on to a chat application, which I feel like is more for more urgent questions, right? If you go into a forum, you're going to expect there to be more conversation and longer form and that kind of stuff. One of the things that we've had to have conversations about internally is how much support do we want to give to discourse? Like how much traffic does it get? How many users are joining there? How many people are going there looking for answers? And that kind of informs our decisions around how much time I should be spending there, how much time we should encourage developers to spend there, like internal developers, people that would be supporting the external folks, and helps us make really intelligent decisions there. And the same thing with Slack. We've seen Slack have a huge amount of attraction for external people because they can get that like immediate conversational sort of help. And so that has allowed us to say, no, we really do need to encourage internal developers to at least pay attention or at least sign up for an account. So I can say, hey, can you go look at this specific questions and send them a link, and they don't have to necessarily monitor it, but they're available there to ask or to answer questions when they come up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's quite interesting that specific insight about people that go to this course in the first place, and then after 2-3 hours they go to Slack.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting to measure indeed, to have extra data here, like what's the average time, and look for the urgency of those.
Yeah,
so
I was looking back through questions that never got an answer on Discourse, and it's almost entirely, not almost entirely, that's not fair. A large number of them are questions that also got answered in Slack. And it was just stuff that I had seen come through Slack. So it was like just pinging in my brain, like, oh, I saw that guy come and ask that question in Slack. It's not something that I necessarily could pull through, like looking at graphs or anything like that, but it was definitely something that I noticed.
Yeah.
Benny, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so are you using a lot of this data just for yourself personally, or are other members of Chef also looking at this data, you know, kind of more as a collective, kind of a long-term goal? So because sometimes the way you were talking, you know, it was right to help kind of guide actions or to understand current actions, which I would consider to be a little bit more short-term. But there may also be long-term implications from this. I'm mostly curious as to how you're using this.
So it's a little bit of both. I watch it on a, like, not quite daily, I would say 2 or 3 times a week basis. I look for abnormalities and that kind of stuff. For example, we had a user set up a bot to interact with our chef, or interact with our cookbooks almost a month ago now. And out of nowhere, there was just this massive increase in pull requests. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I was able to be like, oh, okay, I know what this is, it's okay. So for me, it's like a regular check-in, that kind of stuff. And then the same data, though I don't necessarily send them links to these dashboards because they'll never find them again, but I share the same data and like some conclusions from the data with our executives on a, normally it's on a quarterly basis. Sometimes it's more frequent if they've got specific questions around initiatives that the marketing team has taken anywhere else, but it's mostly quarterly.
Okay.
So
cool.
Kind of both.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. Thank you, Benny. So maybe Alberto, if you're around and you don't mind, maybe you can help us guess how you build the specific dashboards and kind of the process we followed. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, well, the process was easy in the sense that basically we had a set of metrics from Chef, from Benny and Francis. So we started looking at the data we had and trying to understand what metrics we can easily compute with Kibana and with the data we already had there. So we started by building a simple dashboard with some of these visualizations you are looking at right now.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we iterated a couple of times, I think, with Benny, just to know which metrics we were missing, because some of the metrics we didn't have at the very first iteration. Was, for instance, this bar chart you have on the right hand side. Yes, if you can scroll up, please. Yes, you have the active channels, but the previous one, the first one on the right, yeah, is the number of active users. For some reason, in the first approach we implemented, we only had one of these, but both of them under the hood and are almost the same query. So, well, without that iteration, probably we had been totally unable to build this panel, because, well, you build one metric because you think that's the metric that could be interesting for the customer or for whoever that may be interested on this, because, well, we are in the Grimoire Lab meeting, so it could be anyone from the community asking for a metric. And sometimes you have another metric that is, I don't know, 90% similar to this one, but basically you don't go for that metric because you don't even think that that metric could be interesting, just because you are focused on the exact metric you were asked for. In this case, I don't remember if it was active channels or active users, but just by the name, you can see that it's almost the same, just counting channels or counting users, but the number is just a count of things through time. So, well, this is a bit of the story at a high level. Going for the technical details, in this case for Slack, we have a panel that I'm not especially proud of it, because it's like a reminiscence of our old IRC panel. It's not bad, but it's not giving a lot of information, at least not the information you could be interested in when you go to Slack, because here you have the participants, you have the messages through time, the organizations, well, a set of common metrics, but you don't have here the number of people that is joining Slack. And that's something that we realize that can be done with some restrictions, but can be done because you can go for the server messages. You can see here that we have a filter on top at the left-hand side saying not server activity. In the other dashboard, we relied on this to build the table of newcomers just by looking some channels. So if you look for people joining some channels, you have the newcomers. And, well, that was an idea that was not originally created by Bitergia. That was something that Benny and Frances told us in a meeting. And they say, hey, if you look for this channel and this other channel, and you can see if people are joining there, then you have the newcomers. And then Daniel say, well, I think we have the server messages, so let me go to the Discover tab and check the data. So maybe, Danny, you can go to the Discover tab to show basically what you did, which is just exploring the data, going to the Slack index. And once you are in the Slack index,
yeah, what I did was to look for join. I look for kind of a keyword, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so we have, whoops, sorry. We have this, that certain person has joined the channel. This is what you mean, right,
Yeah.
Alberto? Okay.
Yeah, so basically we did this during the meeting, and we realized that this metric was feasible with the data we already had. And it's something we didn't know. We had the data, but for some reason, we didn't think about computing this specific metric, which is probably one of the most interesting ones for Slack data. A bit of background about the Slack data is that, well, we have here messages. We don't have other information. So we need to rely on the messages to compute all the metrics. So you can have the number of messages sent by a person or sent to a channel or whatever, but you cannot go to other levels. Like for instance, hey, tell me what is the number of active users for this channel. And this is important because another thing we need to have in this DevRel dashboard was the number of active users per channel. And in this case, what we have in the data is the number of users in the channel at the time the message was retrieved. That means that, well, it's not the specific number, the current number of users in the channel, but probably it's pretty close because it's going to depend on the last message we received from that channel. So we can say if we have a message to a channel this week, we are going to have the number of users in that channel for this week, probably with a slight difference, but not a big one. So, well, that's for Slack because in this kind of data sources, when we rely on messages or posts, as in this course, we always miss some information related to a more high endpoints. In this case, it's channel. In this course, probably is going to be users because you can access the API endpoint for users to get information like when a user joined the in this case the channel. In the case of this course, when joined this course, but we don't have that information because of this the index we have. It's something we could have, but to have that information, we will need a different index. So the thing is, well, we can go for that, but this is going to be harder because building an index and managing two different indexes for the same data source could be tricky for synchronization and this kind of things. So the first approach is always trying to use the information we already have, trying to find a way of having what we miss there or to infer what we need from the information we already had with some simple metrics or not so simple metrics, depending on the case. I think these two cases were the two more relevant cases for this panel. Probably from the point of view of having the dashboard developed and the data here, it seems like it was easy. And in fact, well, the solution probably it's not difficult, but the path to the solution is not that easy because you need to have the right question on the table and start to look for the data from that question. In other case, you have a lot of data and you probably are going to basically build some metrics with the more, let's say, clear fields, in the sense, the numbers you can clearly see when you look at the data. So I don't know, Danny, if you want to add something on your side, because you were also in the conversations.
Actually, do.
So, yeah. Oh, Benny.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add in the way that we decided on the channels to monitor for new users was based on the default channels that people get added to when they join. So if they join all of these channels at the same time, then we know that that's a new user, because somebody might leave the general channel and like later rejoin or that kind of stuff. So general by itself isn't necessarily a good metric, but all of these channels at the same time, we know this is a new user. That was it.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Robert and Benny. So what I would add here to this conversation that we are having is that it's really important to have in the first place domain knowledge, which is in this case shared by Benny, and then the data knowledge, so where the metrics and indexes and all of this stuff is, which is in this case shared by us or the Grimoire Lab community. So that tandem is really powerful. And then I've seen this other times, like if we have the people asking the right questions, like I have this problem here, then this is when you click and say, hey, okay, so what if we try this? And that's really interesting. Yeah, so I do have another question for you, Benny, because then this is what we have right now for DevRel. But I don't know if we have already thought about the evolution of these metrics, because I assume this is useful like nowadays. You said this is the first time the chef was hiring a community manager. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So then this means that you are kind of wondering like the first steps, but what do you see like in the medium term, like from here in a year, in a couple of years?
So I'll adjust your premise a little bit. This is actually, from my perspective, this would be the second iteration, because the first iteration, Bitergia had already worked with Chef and built a bunch of data sources, or built a bunch of like data representations that answered things that engineering wanted, but didn't answer necessarily things that DevRel wanted. So then I went back and was like, okay, here's the list of questions that I have that aren't answered in these pages. And that's when, so this is technically, I guess, second iteration, right? And then what's going to happen in the next, I would even say 3 to 6 months is going to be very interesting, because I have, because there's been no community management for at least a while, and nobody that's just focused on community as like a high level strategy sort of thing in a while, the company has no current community-based goals. So, and this kind of came up as part of a conversation around our conference that's happening in 2 weeks. So directly after ChefConf, it's going to be me, the head of engineering, our CEO, and the head of marketing getting together and saying, okay, what do we actually want to accomplish? Because I have my goals and the things that I've set forth, but they want to get involved and have like from a business perspective, what are the goals that they want to see us achieve, right? So it'll be very interesting to see how this evolves as the executives kind of get their hands in it and say, okay, this is where we want us to go, or this is what we want to see, or that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting, even in the short term.
Yeah. So when we discuss about metrics in CHAOSS as a whole, we try to follow this goal question metric approach. So in the first place, try to set up these business goals or community goals or cultural goals. And then we try to go for the questions, and then at the very end, the metrics, which is somehow would be, so you already came with a bunch of questions like, hey, I need answers for this. So then let's try to work on this. Well, I don't know if there are other questions by other attendees, because I'm the only one here talking.
No, this has been, I asked my one question earlier, but this has been super fascinating.
Nice.
Good, thank you.
And I really like this. I love this approach with the Grimoire Lab call too. This is super, it did a lot, it did a number of things, right? So it talked about metrics, it talked about Grimoire Lab, it talked about deployments. So it was really great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining. Yeah, so well, we typically try to finish the meeting like 5-7 minutes, so then we have some more time for the next one, which is the weekly meetings for CHAOSS, just in case Benny, you would like to join us for just it's like a weekly meeting where we all meet and say hello and keep updated each other and so on.
Very cool.
Well, Matt and Georg can bring some more context here.
You got it.
Okay, thank you. So then, yeah, the very last question is about the GitHub for DevRel. So we've discussed about Discord and Slack for new users and so on. And then we have GitHub. So it's GitHub kind of the usual path that users follow. So then at the end, you will find some of them producing things in GitHub.
So if we talk about a user journey, I'm still trying to map it out. And actually what we've got from Bitergia is really, really helping me, but it seems to wildly differ and be completely disparate. Like everybody seems to arrive at Chef in a different way. I can't, it's so, it's so crazy. I know that if we talk about GitHub as an entry point, it is almost always somebody that's like been dropped into Chef, like they've got a general familiarity from before, from a previous job or something like that. And then they get dropped into a Chef environment that isn't working the way they expect or something like that. So then they end up going to look at the source code and saying, what is it doing here? Why is it doing this? And then from there, they either either submit a bug request or a bug report, or sometimes we see a pull request result, but almost always it's either a bug report or they then go into Slack and say, this isn't working how I want it to. Am I misunderstanding, or is there like another solution, or what, yada, yada, yada. If they're entering through GitHub, that's almost always what it is.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. So these were kind of my questions that I had in my mind for today's session. So thank you, Benny, for being here.
No problem.
And
Can
coming to
I
the GrimoireLab. Yeah,
ask a question?
of course.
Absolutely.
So Benny, when you say you are still working on the user journey, what approach are you taking in defining that?
Depending on what you mean by approach. I mean, literally looking at somebody's email address and saying, where did they sign up first? Where did they interact with us first? Some of it we can get with email addresses, right? Some of it is, we actually also work with, there's a marketing platform that I can't remember the name of, right? Marketo. So Marketo also allows us to track like people's journey through our different applications. GitHub is not something that we can track with Marketo, but we can watch them click links on our site that take them to GitHub and then take them elsewhere, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And so you're looking at where do people come from? What's their first point of interaction with the community? Mm-hmm. And then trying to understand if there's patterns, I assume.
Yes. Because that's going to be the goal, right? How to first identify where people are going and then find the one where most people, the path that most people are taking, and make that as smooth as possible.
Yeah, thank you for the question and the answer,
yeah.
Benny. So from a GrimoireLab perspective, our goal in the community would be to share these 3 panels that we have in Discord, Slack, and GitHub for DevRel into the community. So and of course, we would like to thank you for your time tuning them and so on. So it would be fantastic to share this together. Yeah, I think this is all for today. So we are now 10 minutes to the call. So maybe we can stop recording now. Yeah,